10 kings, popes, and millionaires had unlimited money, the best doctors alive, and one goal: never die. Every cure they bought killed them. I'll tell you which one I would have fallen for. Day 1. Qin Shi Huang. You already know this man, not his name, his tomb. He is the one buried with 8,000 clay soldiers, and I think that army is the least interesting thing he ever bought. His name was Qin Shi Huang. 210 years before Christ, he had conquered every rival kingdom in China, and at 49, he had one war left. The one against his own death. So he did what you or I would do. He hired the best experts alive, the best funded immortality program on the planet, and its medicine was cinnabar, mercury ore, sometimes lead, sometimes arsenic. He trusted the best experts money could hire. The experts were fatally wrong. He died on his 5th tour of the empire, on the road, heading east, toward the sea where the Immortals Islands were supposed to be. The single most powerful man alive spent his last journey chasing a rumor a paid expert sold him. So his chancellor, Li Si, hid the death for the 2 months it took to get home. Clothes changed daily, food carried in. 2 carts of rotting fish rode ahead of him and behind him so nobody would smell the truth. The first emperor of China went home under a fish cart, and nobody ever tells you that part. Years before, he had already sent a fleet east, 60 ships, 3,000 boys, 3,000 girls, sailing to find the same islands. None of them ever came back. So who do you actually blame? I don't blame him. He asked the cleverest men alive how not to die, and they handed him poison. I would have drunk it, and so would you. His tomb still tests unusually high in mercury 2,200 years later. A century on, the Han princes tried a different fix, not stopping death from the inside, but sealing the body from the outside. Day 2. Liu Sheng and Dou Wan. A century after Qin Shi Huang, a Han prince named Liu Sheng was buried in 2,498 plates of jade, sewn together with about 1,100 grams of gold wire. His wife, Dou Wan, followed him a few years later in a suit of 2,160 plates. He was sealed like a jar, 188 centimeters of jade in 12 fitted sections, every one of his 9 bodily openings plugged. A carved jade cicada lay on his lips, meant to carry his soul into the next world. Every other opening on his body was plugged with jade, so that nothing organic would ever touch open air again. But no jade suit ever discovered has preserved a body inside it. The jade survived every single time. He didn't. Worse, later chroniclers recorded Han tombs being robbed and sometimes burned, specifically to strip out the jade plates and the gold wire. Robbed for the very armor that was supposed to protect the person inside it. I keep going back to the robbers. Armor that makes your grave worth digging up isn't being remembered. Although, I will grant you this, it did make them famous, 2,000 years later. In a museum case. 100 years on, a new emperor named Cao Pi finally banned jade burial suits outright, ending 4 centuries of the fashion by decree. He could ban a burial suit. Nobody has ever managed to ban what came next. Day 3. The Tang Elixir Emperors. Over roughly 40 years, at least 5 Tang emperors, some accounts say 6, were incapacitated or killed by their own immortality elixirs. And almost every time, the next emperor executed the alchemist responsible, then hired a new one. The first of them, Emperor Xianzong, hired an alchemist named Liu Mi in 818. His own advisors asked for exactly one thing first: let Liu Mi eat his own medicine for a year. Xianzong refused. Xianzong died in 820. His own son had Liu Mi beaten to death within the month. Then he started taking elixirs himself. 2 emperors later, Wuzong's own alchemist told him the problem was his name. It clashed with the water element. Wuzong changed it. He died 12 days later, aged 33. The court's own record from that year says he grew so irritable he could not speak for 10 days at a time. One more emperor tried to be the clever one, switched to elixirs made from vegetables instead. He died anyway, in 859. It's not really about any one of these men. We punish the person who fooled us, and we keep right on believing the thing that fooled us. And this pattern keeps repeating across empires for centuries. The next one doesn't even have 5 confirmed deaths. It might not have 1. Day 4. Pope Innocent VIII. In July of 1492, a widely repeated chronicle claims a physician drew blood from 3 10-year-old boys to treat a dying pope. All 3 boys, the story says, died. The pope died anyway. Modern historians treat the story as invented. Even the Catholic Church's own encyclopedia warns that its single source cannot be trusted. The tale has the exact shape of a blood libel. What the record from that actual time says is quieter and sadder. A witness named Filippo Valori wrote that the dying pope could keep down nothing except drops of milk from a young woman's breast. I threw this one out, and it still belongs here. The lie outlasted the truth. This one was a story about a story. The next one I cannot talk my way out of. It has a paper trail, and it names the ages of the girls. Day 5. The Jiajing Emperor. A Taoist priest named Tao Zhongwen supplied the Jiajing Emperor with elixirs of red lead and white arsenic. Officials who called the preparations toxic were executed. But red lead had a second meaning inside the palace, a substance drawn from young girls at their very first menstrual blood. Girls of 13 and 14 were kept there and fed only mulberry leaves and rainwater to stay what the court called pure. On the 27th of November, 1542, 16 palace women tried to strangle him in his sleep with a silk cord. The knot was tied wrong. He survived it, the only recorded uprising of palace women in the whole of Chinese history, against a man trying to live forever. And instead of stopping, he expanded the program. 300 girls aged 11 to 14 in 1547, 200 more in 1552, minimum age dropped to 8, 150 more under 8 in 1555. Across the whole life of the program, close to 1,000 girls and women were taken. You want this to be the part where the women finally win. It isn't. They failed on a badly tied knot, and the price was slow execution for the 16 and for their families. Even one innocent consort, who had no part in any of it, paid the same price. Near death made him more certain, not less, and that is the part I cannot forgive. He died in 1567 at 59, an ordinary age after 1,000 girls. He bought nothing, and I want you to hold that number. Across the world, in that same decade, somebody else was buying the exact same thing, and for a while actually seemed to be getting it. Day 6. Diane de Poitiers. She drank a daily tonic of gold chloride mixed with ether, a real, soluble compound, not the inert gold leaf people imagine. And she was never queen. She was mistress to Henry II, 20 years her senior, in a court that worshipped youth above almost everything else. In 2009, a hair analysis found roughly 500 times the normal human level of gold in her remains. A courtier named Brantôme met her 6 months before she died and could not stop staring. He wrote that 100 more years would not have aged her face. Then, almost in passing, he mentions the potable gold and other drugs she took daily. The compliment is the diagnosis. He just didn't know it yet. A fall from a horse is the other leading explanation, and it is a good one. She rode daily, well into her 60s. The court watched heavy metal poisoning happen in front of them for years and called it beauty. We still do this. And out of everyone in this whole film, she's the only one who actually looked like she was winning. For a while, I'd have called that a win. Her remains came out of a mass grave. Her tomb was destroyed in the French Revolution. Nothing she bought outlived her by a century. And I think that is the whole trade in one sentence. 50 years later, a countess 1,000 miles east got the exact opposite reputation for something she never actually did. Day 7. Erzsébet Bathory. The story of her bathing in blood first appears in print in 1729, 115 years after she died. It comes from a single writer, Terracotta, in a book called Tragic History. The actual trial testimony from 1611 didn't surface until 1765 and wasn't published until 1817. It contains none of it, no Babs, anywhere, in the entire record. The murders were investigated. She was confined from 1610 until her death in 1614. None of that ever needed a bath in it. The higher victim counts, up towards 650, are genuinely disputed. The honest answer is, I don't know. Monstrous serial killer? Or a wealthy widow destroyed by men who wanted her land? The record genuinely does not settle it. Neither will I. Nobody had to invent anything about the next one. He ran his own laboratory, and he paid for the recipe himself. Day 8. Charles II. He reportedly paid a genuinely large sum for the recipe to distill human skull into medicine, what the sources call the king's drops, corpse medicine. There is no gentler way to say it. And it wasn't some fringe eccentricity. It was mainstream European pharmacy for 2 centuries. About 5 pounds of crushed human skull went into each batch. On his deathbed, 40 drops a day were poured down his throat by people who loved him. He wasn't alone in this either. The King of France, Francis I, carried a pouch of mummy powder with him everywhere he went. When European demand for mummy powder finally outran Egypt's actual supply, dealers started faking it, using fresh corpses, executed criminals, the unclaimed poor. Demand didn't stop when the supply ran out. When rich people want a body part badly enough, somebody, somewhere, finds bodies. That was the pharmacy of an entire continent. The 20th century's version wasn't any more rational. It was just better dressed. A year after the king died of it, a woman named Anne Dormer wrote to her sister, "I take the king's drops and drink chocolate, and when my soul is sad to death, I run and play with the children." Day 9. Serge Voronoff. On the 12th of June 1920, Voronoff performed the first monkey gland graft into a human being, thin slices of chimpanzee testicle sewn directly in. Patients paid enormous sums, certain they'd get their youth back, restored vigor, restored strength, years added to their lives. By 1923, he'd performed 44 of these grafts, 6 of them on doctors. That year, at the International Congress of Surgeons in London, around 700 surgeons stood up and applauded him. But the effects always faded within 3 to 5 years. The procedure was quietly abandoned by around 1930. Voronoff died in 1951, aged 85, wealthy and thoroughly discredited. I notice he outlived most of his patients. 6 of these Byers were doctors. They read the same literature I would have read and still rolled up their sleeves. Consensus is not evidence, and neither of us is immune to a room that agrees. The room applauded a surgeon. The next man on this list just did exactly what his own doctor told him to do. Day 10. Eben Byers. Eben Byers had won the U.S. Amateur Golf Championship in 1906 and now ran an iron company. On his own doctor's advice, he drank roughly 1,400 bottles of a radioactive tonic called Radithor. It wasn't some exotic device. It was radium, dissolved directly in water, sold openly on prescription. In 1932, an investigator named Wynne walked into Byers' oceanfront mansion to interview him. What he found, he wrote up exactly as he saw it. His whole upper jaw was gone, except for 2 front teeth. Most of his lower jaw was gone too. Holes were forming in his skull. He was buried in a lead-lined coffin. On the 19th of December, 1931, the FTC finally ordered Bailey Radium Laboratories to stop making its safety claims. Bailey didn't even contest the order, not after Byers' own testimony. The state didn't act when Radithor went on sale. It acted when the man losing his jaw was rich enough to be heard. I don't think that order is an accident. 200 years before Byers, one Chinese emperor's own successor had already thrown every alchemist out of the palace, for good, in 1735. Proof the cycle could actually be broken. It took the West 2 more centuries, and it took a dead golf champion's jaw to do it. The paperwork arrived 4 months before he did. The New Kings. A company called Ambrosia was selling something simple: 1 liter of plasma from a donor between 16 and 25 for $8,000 a bag. Sold to clients over 35. By the summer of 2017, around 600 people had already said yes. Then, on the 19th of February 2019, the FDA said there was no proof any of it worked. The company said, that same day, that it had already stopped. Its founder started again a few months later, under a different name, selling plasma with no age listed at all. Then, in January of 2022, a company called Altos Labs launched with $3 billion for cellular rejuvenation, more money than every other method in this film combined. It isn't the only one. Cryonics tanks, longevity clinics, a whole industry that didn't exist 20 years ago. Selling the exact same promise the very first king on this whole list already tried to buy. I'll say this one plainly, and I'm ready to be told I'm wrong. This one isn't the same as mercury. It's peer-reviewed, it's regulated, and it genuinely might work, which is exactly what makes it the most interesting name on this whole list, and not the punchline. And the people buying this? They're not hiding it. They never have. Every method in this entire film happened in plain sight, in public record, which is worse than any secret could ever be. Kings drank mercury, and emperors drank lead, and somewhere between then and now, we just started calling it a clinical trial. Which one would I have fallen for? Honestly, Diane de Poitiers. Day 6. She's the only name on the whole list promising something I'd actually want, just looking young, not something that sounds insane the second you say it out loud. 4,000 years before any of them, the oldest story we have, the Epic of Gilgamesh, already told this exact ending. Its king wins the one plant that makes an old man young. He sets it down for a second, to bathe. A snake takes it and sheds its own skin right in front of him. We've been having this exact same argument with ourselves since before we had writing to have it in. Which one of these would you have fallen for? Somewhere on this screen, there's a small button that subscribes you, costs nothing, and I genuinely appreciate it. See you next time.